Alrighty, thank you everybody for your patience, and I am calling to order the second half of the Plainfield Hazard Mitigation Committee meeting on May 15th, 2025. I'm Maggie Bear, the chair of the committee. And I'd like to introduce our guests for this evening. We have Michelle Braun from Friends of the Winooski and Alex Marcucci from SLR International Corporation. And I think, yeah, we can get right in on it. Michelle, did you want to go first?
Sure.
Wait a minute, you don't have a mic. You give that to you. Yeah, say it, please. It knows you're there.
Okay. Let's see how loud. Okay. Hi, I'm Michelle Braun, the Executive Director of Friends of the Winooski River. And we're here to talk about the old Batchelder Mill Dam. Not sure it's on. The microphone?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on.
It is, okay.
There we
Can you
go.
hear me? That's good. Yeah. That Maggie's up there?
Yeah.
It was, yeah. So our presentation agenda is an introduction to Friends of the Winooski River. And then I'll review the dam removal general concepts and ecological restoration concepts. Talk about the old Batchelder Mill process to date. And then introduce you to Alex, who will present the feasibility study findings. And then she'll turn it back to me to go over where the process goes from here. So Friends of the Winooski River is a local grassroots citizens group. We've been around for more than 25 years and we do all kinds of stuff. The Winooski watershed is 1,000 square miles. It's kind of a unique watershed in that it spans the Green Mountains and runs from Cabot all the way to Lake Champlain. We do a lot of education and outreach activities. We really see it as central to our mission to provide a way for people to get involved with helping the river be cleaner and healthier and more resilient. And so we offer a lot of volunteer opportunities like collecting water samples and planting trees and doing cleanups. And then we also do bigger engineered restoration projects like the one we're here to talk about tonight. We do though plant a lot of trees, and I just want to show that for a moment. In the last 15 years, we've planted more than 40,000 native trees and shrubs in 19 towns on 125 acres with thousands of volunteers, including these cute Cub Scouts. And you can see a before and after here of planting we did. And one reason I'm showing this is because a lot of the area upstream of the old Batchelder Dam looks like the before picture here. And part of this project is going to be planting trees and shrubs along the river for the many benefits that those provide. So priority challenges in the Winooski watershed include phosphorus, which is a nutrient that helps plants grow, including the algae in Lake Champlain, sediment, which transports phosphorus to Lake Champlain, and clogs infrastructure and makes erosion worse and makes the river unhealthy for insects and fish. And then connectivity, which is rivers being disconnected from their floodplains by development and fish populations being disconnected by barriers like dams. So the reason I'm showing you these priority challenges is because water removal actually helps with all three of our top challenges in the watershed. It's a really beneficial thing to do for the river. Similar project type, to dam removal is culvert replacement. We did this project in 2023 in Basin. And the picture on the left is the before, that culvert's only 7 feet wide. The new culvert is 16 feet wide and has a natural bottom. And it opened up miles of, high quality cold water habitat, all the way up into the national forest. And when the Mad River Valley flooded badly last year, the brand new culvert did not fail, and that road was good. So, dam removal projects, we've completed one. At Friends of the Winooski, Camp Leacowie. We are working on 5 projects in design. And we'll be designing the remainder of the Clark's Sawmill project. The benefits of dam removal, as I alluded to, are they improve the overall stream health and stability. They improve the habitat for everybody who lives in the river. They open miles of stream for passage into the headwaters. Removing this dam opens up 110 kilometers of river for fish. It's a really great project. And lowers flood elevations, and Alex will show you some very cool modeling that she has done of the change in flood elevation here. And they also, removing the dams in a controlled and planned way, helps us avoid dam failure. So this is the East Callis Mill Dam, and this picture on the right is what it looked like after the July 23 flood. We're working on designing the removal of that dam. And this, it's only partially breached. If it fully breached, it would be much worse. This is the Clark Sawmill Dam in Cabot. Some folks may already be familiar with. This is what it looked like in 2016. And there it isn't anymore after the July 23 flood. A lot of dams in Vermont are just getting really old and they haven't been maintained. And they are, in fact, prone to failure. So how do dam removal projects work? There are different entities involved in the project have different roles and responsibilities. Friends of the Winooski River's involvement in the project is to be the project manager. We sort of oversee and coordinate the funding, the contractors, make sure that all of the stakeholders' needs are met, and make sure that the whole project runs smoothly. And then we have engineers, and that's Alex, who's here tonight, and Roy, who's here tonight from SLR Consulting. They do all of the technical work, determining how to remove the river, how to remove the structure safely, and how to remove it in compliance with all of the regulations that apply. These projects are super regulated. We have to get a pile of permits. And then the construction contractors are another entity that comes in and does the actual demolition and site work. And the community members, all of you, are of course an essential part of the team, especially in this case, since the community is the landowner, the community owns the dam. So you're really a key stakeholder in this process. And then state and federal agency partners. We work really closely with the State Fish and Wildlife, the State Department of Environmental Conservation, Federal Fish and Wildlife, Army Corps of Engineers, and we try to have all of those folks involved from the beginning so that we have a lot of expertise and a lot of support to navigate these really pretty complicated projects. And the projects are done in a series of phases. Phase 1, project development, is identifying the project, doing some preliminary fundraising, scoping and feasibility. And that is where we are with this old Batchelder mill. We have just completed phase 1 project development. Friends of the Winooski River raised some funds. We procured an engineering firm through a competitive procurement process, and they have completed a feasibility study. The next phase is design and engineering. That takes about 18 to 24 months, for a project of this level of complexity. And then, once the design is finished and the permits are obtained, and we have raised the funds for implementation, implementation actually goes pretty quickly. We're only allowed to work in streams in Vermont in July, August, and September. So, once we are ready to go, it'll just take a couple months. And then afterward is project monitoring, where we're required by some of our permits to come back pretty much annually and check on the river channel and so forth, how the vegetation is doing. So how we got here is in October 2023, the Hazard Mitigation Committee invited Friends of the Winooski to talk about whether thinking about removing the dam would be a good idea. And we thought it was a great idea. So we raised some funds and hired SLR in May 2024. And now they've completed the feasibility study. And we submitted a hazard mitigation grant application to the state of Vermont that would fully fund the design and implementation of the project. And we just heard this morning that that has reviewed very well and is in a good position to maybe, hopefully, move on to the FEMA review. We also submitted a request for congressionally delegated spending to Senator Welch's office. That's, what's commonly called an earmark. So in the case that the FEMA funding doesn't work out, the earmark is another option. And we'll talk about some other possibilities later, but I'm going to turn it over to Alex for the technical stuff.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Michelle. So my name is Alex Marcucci. I am a water resources scientist at SLR Consulting, and myself, along with my coworkers, Roy, who is here, and our coworker Monica, have been working on the feasibility study for removal of the old Batchelder Mill Dam. And as Michelle noted, we've been working with the Friends of the Winooski River on this project. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the dam, but just to give a little bit of background information on the dam itself. So it's located right in the village here. You can see it kind of if you look off Main Street. It's between the Main Street Bridge and the Great Brook confluence with the Winooski River. So it's located right on the Winooski River, and the dam itself is about 15 feet tall, about 75 feet wide, and it's comprised of granite blocks. So it's a stone masonry dam that dates quite a ways back. So we have some interesting historical information, courtesy of the Plainfield Historical Society. And so the first iteration of the old Batchelder Mill Dam was actually a timber crib dam that was built in 1798 with an associated mill. And this photo here is from 1877, I believe. There was a big fire that destroyed the mill as well as that timber crib dam. And what's kind of neat about this photo, you can see the Main Street Bridge right here where my cursor is. And the dam that has been burned and breached here is that you can see through the smoke a little bit of the river channel that's kind of currently underwater there through the Main Street Dam. And you can see a little bit of, it looks kind of like a little cascade, which is what we anticipate is actually underneath the water there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. And then in 1877, the dam that is currently there, that stone masonry dam, was built by the Batchelders as well as the old Batchelder Mill. And
in the mid 1900s, I believe, the mill building burned down, but the dam is still in place, and you can even see some of the old foundation out there kind of along the riverbank as well. So the dam's been in place for quite a while, about 150 years, and although an iteration has been in place for much longer. So one thing that we kind of want to talk a little bit about is the dam safety and risk component of the dam. So as Michelle touched on, we have a lot of these older dams that are kind of crumbling throughout the state and are a significant risk as far as dam failure goes. Like she highlighted the Clark Sawmill example where during flooding that dam did breach. So the stone masonry dam, you can kind of see in these photos, while it does provide this nice falling water feature and some of the water is going over the top of the dam, you can see in the photo that water is also going through the face of the dam. So there's seepage that we've observed occurring between the granite blocks. And that seepage, those patterns kind of change with changing flows we've observed. So that indicates that the sediment kind of at the upstream face of the dam is moving around a bit, and the water is kind of shifting as well, moving through the dam. And another thing that can occur with that seepage is that in the winter, the water in between the blocks can freeze, and that can kind of further destabilize the dam. So if the dam were to fail, there's of course, the potential for significant damage to occur both downstream with kind of a surge of water and sediment that could wash downstream, but also upstream of the dam. As we all know, we've kind of have a lot of infrastructure, we have a lot of buildings, we have the Main Street Bridge kind of all built right along the river upstream of the dam. So if the dam were to fail, if something were to happen, then the river would kind of change and adjust pretty dramatically, pretty quickly through there. So that could lead to destabilizing of the banks and potentially some of the structures that are upstream of the dam. So just to outline kind of the goals of this initial feasibility study that we've completed for Michelle and Friends of the Winooski River. So as Michelle mentioned, it's kind of the first phase in a many-phase process. So we collected some limited data on the dam and on the impoundment. We performed what we call an alternatives analysis. So we looked at different options for the dam, like doing nothing, removing the dam, the whole dam, removing part of the dam, and try to determine whether the dam would be a good candidate for removal, which we did determine that it would be a good candidate. We identified potential obstacles to dam removal and kind of areas we need to look into more. And then we did prepare a conceptual engineering design and cost estimate for the dam removal, which I'll also talk about in a little bit. And so before anything would be constructed here, before the dam would be removed or anything like that, there would need to be a lot more design work that would happen, a lot more data collection. As Michelle mentioned, also permitting is a big piece with state and federal regulators as well. So part of our assessment work, we went out in the field and we looked at the dam to look at kind of the condition of the dam. We also went upstream to look at the river, take kind of physical measurements of the river, look at the sediment that's impounded behind the dam. And we also, our structural engineer, looked at some of the structural elements that are upstream of the dam, including kind of all of the walls that are upstream and the bridge and kind of some of the building foundations as well, to determine the condition that those are in and what implications dam removal might have for all of the structures upstream. So we made some maps that just kind of note some of our field data collection, some of our measurements that we took. So the dam, just for context, is right down here. And we kind of walked and paddled the whole stretch upstream and a little bit downstream of the dam as well to kind of characterize the river and see, what the channel width kind of is throughout that section. And then also try and estimate the amount of sediment that's impounded behind the dam and note areas as well of instability and erosion and whatnot along the river that could potentially need to be addressed with dam removal. And what we found through our study is that the impoundment behind the old Batchelder Mill Dam extends about a mile upstream to upstream of the John Fowler Road Bridge, kind of between John Fowler Road and Martin Bridge Park is where we believe the impoundment behind the dam ends. So there's also a Route 2 embankment up there that's kind of unstable that might need to be addressed with dam removal. So one important thing that we consider when we're thinking about dam removal projects is how much sediment is kind of impounded behind these dams and how much sediment we might recommend to be removed with the dam removal. So typically when a dam is removed, there's a lot of sediment that's been deposited behind it over, in this case, you know, the 150 years that the dam has been there. And so as part of construction, typically a portion or all of the sediment that's behind the dam is removed when the dam is also removed. So what you see here on the slide is a longitudinal profile of the river. So if you're kind of looking lengthwise at the river from a side view, then you can see the surface of the water up here and the water and then the sediment below the water. The dam is down here, and this is based on our field measurements of the amount of sediment that we believe to be out there. And what you can see is this kind of wedge of sediment that extends for about a mile upstream behind the dam. And we also did find some bedrock during our probing efforts. As I mentioned in that historic photo, so kind of from right upstream of the Main Street Bridge down through the dam, we believe that there's bedrock underwater there, and that would be exposed if the dam were to be removed. Another piece of the work that we did as part of the feasibility assessment was doing a reconnaissance of structural elements upstream of the dam. So we have this map that we were working from of different buildings right upstream of the dam. So the dam is down here in the corner, and we, with our structural engineer, we went out to some of these properties and we evaluated kind of the foundations of these buildings as well as all of the retaining walls that are in between the buildings, just to get a sense of what the current condition is of a lot of these structural elements, as well as if and how they might need to be stabilized if the dam removal were to happen, as the river would be changing thereafter. So in addition to kind of our field assessments, we did a lot of office work as well. So we did some hydraulic modeling, which essentially this is a river model that you can kind of build on a computer to simulate how water moves through a system. So you have your ground surface component, which is what we're looking at here. You can kind of see the impression of the Winooski River through the middle, and then Great Brook down here. And you put water into the model, and then it calculates water depth and velocity across these two-dimensional cells here. So you can kind of evaluate different flood events and see how water moves through the system. So the model that we're working from has all the bridges, the Main Street Bridge, the John Fowler Road Bridge, and everything in it, as well as the old Batchelder Mill Dam. And one thing that's great about these types of hydraulic models is that we're able to look at existing conditions, so kind of how the river is now, and then also test out different alternatives, such as what might happen in the system if you remove the dam, to see how flood extents and flood depths and flood velocities might change. So similar to that slide about sediment, we're looking at a longitudinal profile here, kind of side view lengthwise on the river, where upstream is on the left and downstream is on the right. And the dam is over here, and the lowest line shown is the stream bed of the Winooski River. And then we have our different flood events. So existing and proposed for the 50-year, 100-year, and 500-year floods are shown on here. And the three highest lines, so these represent the water surface profiles from the dam all the way upstream through John Fowler Road. The highest three are the existing with the dam in place. And what you can see pretty clearly here is that the lowest three are the proposed condition with the dam removed. So what we can kind of tell from this is that in Plainfield Village, which is in this little dotted line box here, what we're seeing in the modeling is a potential reduction in the depth of floodwaters of about 5 to 9 feet, kind of throughout the whole extension of the village, the whole extent of the village. With the dam removed, essentially, the water levels would drop behind the dam, carrying all the way upstream about a mile, maybe even a little bit further. And then farther up in the vicinity of John Fowler Road, we're seeing from this initial modeling potential reductions in flood depths of about 2 to 3 feet. Another component that we're able to look at with the hydraulic model is how the velocity or the speed of the water changes. So what you see on this slide is existing conditions for the 50-year flood on the left side, and then proposed conditions for the 50-year flood on the right side. And the color scheme shows the velocity of the water. So you can see between the two photos there that the extent of the floodwater is changing from the existing to the proposed condition of dam removal, but also the velocity is changing. So the blue-ish colors are lower velocity water, whereas the darker red color is higher velocity water. So as you might expect, the old Batchelder Mill Dam, it holds some water back in flooding. It kind of slows the water down, impounds it, creates a little bit more of stagnant, slower moving water. Versus when you remove that barrier, the water is able to move through the system faster. So what we're seeing with the modeling for removing the dam is that the water, while it's more contained in the river channel, it'll be moving a lot faster.
Upstream.
Yes, upstream of the dam. Thank you, Michelle. And these are some interesting side-by-side comparisons here that show that overlay the existing conditions modeling that we did with the proposed conditions modeling. So in each of these, we're looking at the 50-year flood, 100-year flood, and 500-year flood. And the existing conditions with the dam in place is that kind of red-yellow color scheme that you can see extending out toward Route 2 School Street over here. And the proposed conditions with dam removal is shown in the blue color scheme. So this just kind of highlights that with the dam removal based on this preliminary modeling, it does appear that floodwaters are mostly contained within the channel during the 50-year flood and the 100-year flood, and certainly lessened, the flooding is lessened in extent for the 500-year flood as well, based on the modeling. So this means potentially less flooding for the buildings, the homes and businesses upstream of the dam, if the dam were to be removed. So I mentioned that we did an alternatives analysis where we looked at kind of different options for the dam, including just leave it as is, and evaluated, you know, what that might mean and what the implications of that might be. So this list of alternatives that I'm showing, the first one is the do nothing alternative. And we're not recommending that at this point. As Michelle described, the risk of dam failure, it's present, and we know the dam's not in great condition, and it could pose a risk to both folks who are downstream and also the structures, the bridges, everything upstream as well, if the dam were to fail. So with the deteriorating dam, we do not recommend the do nothing alternative. Another option would be to repair or replace the dam that's currently out there. And we believe that repair is likely not possible due to the type of construction and also the deteriorating condition of the dam. So a new dam or repaired dam would have to meet the Vermont dam safety standards. And doing so would mean that the dam would probably look a lot different. It would have to be changed. It would likely have to be lowered a lot in order to pass the flows that they require in their standards. So it's infeasible to repair, and replacement would be very costly, probably more costly, we estimate, than removal of the dam. And then sometimes there are examples or kind of projects where partial dam removal might be suitable. But in this case, we do not recommend it due to, again, the structure that would remain would have to conform to the Vermont dam safety standards. And it would need to be stabilized or reconstructed as well. And then there would be a requirement for upstream sediment management also there. So full dam removal, we do recommend, as it eliminates the risk of future dam failure. And there would be no maintenance needed because there would be no dam there anymore in the future. And then we also can see through the modeling that it has the potential to reduce flood levels upstream through the village.
And it would reduce regulatory oversight.
Yes, so the dam safety, the Vermont dam safety regulations are kind of changing and evolving, and Roy can speak to it more, but they're going to be more involved, it seems like, and there's going to be kind of changes where there might be more requirements to some of these older, more obsolete dams that, you know, they haven't been paying as much attention to. They're kind of focusing more on them and bringing them up to the current standards now.
I'm on the committee writing that,
Mhm.
so you're right.
And higher fees for dam owners.
Exactly, and
Such as the town.
yeah, so there'd be an annual fee that the town would have to pay as well to maintain a dam in that location. So kind of at the end of our feasibility study, determining that the full dam removal is the recommended alternative here, we prepared a concept design as part of what Michelle mentioned for the HMGP application. So I'll just kind of run through the overview. I'll give a quick overview of the design at this point. So this map shows the dam is, oh, my cursor's frozen. Well, okay, there it is. The dam's right over here and Plainfield Village is shown in the dotted line here. And then upstream, we have John Fowler Road and the upstream extent of the impoundment here. So what we're recommending at this stage of the design is removal of the dam and then removal of impounded sediment shown through this cross-hatched area here. Upstream, a little ways into Marshfield for about a 3.5 acre area where active sediment removal will occur. And I'll show a restoration map in a minute that shows kind of the greater extent of the project includes restoration practices like Michelle was talking about as well. But in addition to removal of the dam and some of that sediment, we know with all the structural elements that are upstream of the dam that some stabilization work is going to have to occur, including along Route 2 up in Marshfield. This embankment is already unstable and eroding. There's some riprap that's kind of falling in the river. And as I discussed before, with the potential increases in water velocity coming through here, stabilizing that embankment as part of the project will be important. And then on the next map. So this is a zoom in of the village here. And as I mentioned, as part of the structural reconnaissance, we kind of visited several of these buildings, looked at the foundations and viewed some other ones from the river. And we have some preliminary recommendations for structural work that would need to occur if the dam were to be removed for some of these buildings and retaining walls to be stabilized so that they wouldn't become more unstable. Yes, with changes with dam removal.
I think some of those houses have been built by FEMA and are slated for removal.
Not yet.
Not yet, yes, some
But
of
that
them,
may happen.
Michael can probably speak to that better.
Would you repeat the question? I'll repeat it for.
Bought by FEMA or?
No,
No,
they have been offered a buyout and they're awaiting appraisal to see if the owners will choose to buy out.
okay.
So the decision, no final decisions have been made for any dwelling or any property.
Thank you. Yeah, so the recommendations that we kind of show here are based on current day, you know, if they're to remain in the house, if the house is to remain there, if the buyout process is not completed for a few of these homes, then we think that some stabilization measures would be prudent at these different structures, just to shore them up, such that faster moving water wouldn't kind of impact them with dam removal. And that includes some recommendations at the Main Street Bridge for anchoring the abutment onto the bedrock that we have observed on kind of that northern side of the bridge. So as part of the design work, we come up with, you know, a ballpark cost estimate at this phase, which we estimated that the whole project, including dam removal, sediment removal, including the stabilization measures that I mentioned at all of those properties upstream and stabilization of the bridge and Route 2, as well as the restoration items, that all falls under that 3 million cost estimate. And then just to show the full extent of the project and the restoration area that we're looking at. So this map kind of shows if the dam were to be removed, if the sediment were to be removed, and kind of the project completed, you might have this narrower low flow channel shown in blue. And then these kind of edge areas forming that would be planted, as well as a more extensive riparian buffer planting on a couple parcels that are adjacent as well. And so as Michelle touched on, we did submit this information to Vermont Emergency Management through the HMGP Hazard Mitigation Grant Program funding program at the end of April. And so this would include 2 phases of work. So it would be all of the rest of the data collection, all of the rest of the engineering design, The permitting we touched on, as well as the construction phase services, which would be phase 2 of this project if it were to be funded. And as part of the HMGP application, FEMA requires you to prepare what's known as a benefit and cost analysis, or a BCA. It's essentially their way of testing, is the project cost effective? You have to get a benefit cost ratio that's greater than 1.0. And so we looked at several project benefits, including riparian plantings and ecological restoration. And then we also looked at those flood depth reductions that we talked about through the modeling for different buildings upstream of the dam. So that's input to the BCA as well. And the project did get a benefit cost ratio of 1.25, which allows it to kind of move through and potentially be submitted to FEMA, as Michelle touched on. So questions on any of that?
If you have a question, would you please come up to the mic so the people online could hear us, please?
I just want, I have like 3 slides and then can we do questions?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Thanks. Oh, okay, I just want to go back to the Clark Sawmill Dam for a second in Cabot. Because I think one thing, when we talk about dam failure, I think people tend to picture like the wall falls down, tsunami of water comes out, and that's the problem with dam failures, this big surge of water. But if you look at this, Clark Sawmill, you see this little white house sitting up here. And then you look at it after the flood. And you see that house up there, you can see what has happened here is the sediment that comes out from behind the dam and pulls the stream banks out from behind the dam is I think, a greater concern, particularly in this scenario where you have a lot of buildings right on that stream bank upstream. So when you think about dam failure, we really have to think about the upstream impacts of the dam failure. I just wanted to get that into people's minds for a moment. And then just lastly, on the timeline, if we were to be approved for FEMA funding, that grant would come to the town of Plainfield. Plainfield would hire a project manager to coordinate that project. And they would hire an engineering firm to complete the design. And that work would start probably mid to late 2026. Would take 18 to 24 months, depending on timing and complexity and so forth. If it completes the final design, then you have to do the cost benefit analysis that Alex just described again, and make sure that it still, as fully designed, is cost beneficial. And then FEMA will pay 75% of the implementation cost. And we would try to raise the balance, and it should be manageable given how beneficial the project is for many reasons. And then in theory, implementation could happen in 2028. I think 2029 is probably more likely. If it's not funded by FEMA this year, we will continue to seek funds for design. It should be very fundable to complete the design with funds for fish passage. And the design timeframe would probably stay about the same. But raising the funding for implementation, if we don't have access to FEMA funds, will be more challenging. Just because that $3 million project is a lot for fish passage funding. And I just want to show you our one dam removal project that we've completed because we're really proud of it and it's pretty. This is the Camp Weacowie Dam in Northfield before removal. And there it is after removal. I think it came out nice.
Yeah.
All right. No question.
Yeah, thank you.
And if anyone online has questions, feel free to also chime in.
Yeah.
I just had a question about well, we live in number 9. And, the bank repair structural stuff, is that something that the homeowners have input into, or is it just a standard way that is done and you have to take what they give you?
Absolutely, you had. Oh, sorry. Yes, you would have input. I mean, the engineering firm that designs the removal will also design those, structural, foundation things. Sorry, okay, please. And it all has to get approved, permitted and approved by many people and so forth. But, yes, absolutely, we will work with homeowners to make sure it's gonna work for you as well.
I have a question which I'm gonna ask to the owl, because I know it can hear me, so you don't have to pass me the mic. The 3 million plus or minus figure for doing the actual dam removal doesn't probably include the cost of the engineering study. Do you have a
does.
hypothetical number for that?
It does include.
It does include it.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay,
should have
that's-
mentioned that. It does include. all
It
the
does,
engineering.
okay, that
Yeah.
actually makes it sound even better,
Yeah.
yeah.
Good question.
And it includes the project management costs and,
Everything,
everything,
permitting,
soup to
everything.
nuts,
And,
yes.
and am I correct that you and Friends of Winooski have offered to be the project manager?
Yes,
Okay, so that's not necessarily unsolved,
correct.
okay.
We would be delighted to be the project manager, but it is, that is a decision the town has to make.
Okay,
I just was curious if you guys could remind us, if the dam stays in place. There are now annual fees or an annual fee. What does that cost? Anybody know? Feeling somebody might ask.
I think that we don't know, partly because we expect this dam to get reclassified.
Yes,
Mhm.
Oh, right, okay.
So once it's reclassified, they'll recalculate.
Do you have a ballpark, like a few
I
hundred?
think it's like between $300 or $1,000 a year for a registration fee for a
And that's
dam.
every year in perpetuity, as long as the dam is there.
Yes,
Yeah, okay, just
and,
curious.
and I believe if I'm not mistaken, although I don't know the number, Roy, but I believe that the funds are part of the way in which the state will then hire more dam safety engineers. In other words, to have everyone, right now, the dams are inspected differently at different timelines and by different regulatory agencies. So if they become, with the exception of those regulated by FERC, which are the ones that are the hydro dams, that increases greatly the number of dams that need to be inspected annually. And as a consequence, we don't have enough dam safety engineers to do that.
And it's not a huge fee, but it's a public
I
expense.
do have one follow-up, wouldn't mind my going next. So,
If you call the town office tomorrow, I can tell you the cost of the fee.
oh, okay. I was just curious, because I have a feeling for some people that'll be a question that comes up, what would it cost? And so my follow-up question is, if we do nothing at all, then the fee would be based on the determined level of risk of failure? Okay, and so if it's determined to be a dam that could fail, then the cost would be on the higher end.
Well, it's not it's not how likely it is to fail, it is how much damage would occur if it failed.
Oh, I see. Okay, thanks.
maybe I'll add something to that real quick. So the reason there's a little, we're not sure, is that things are shifting a little, as Alex said, in the dam safety role right now. And what's been happening a lot is the dams, when you start analyzing them for their hazard class, they're jumping up a level. So right now, this dam is classified as a low hazard dam, but it really feels like a significant hazard dam. So it bumps it into a new class of payment and also a new class of scrutiny. So Michael said that there's more dam safety officials now. And then the burden is going to come back to towns in many is to do an inspection on a schedule. I believe it's every 5 years for a significant hazard dam. If it's a high hazard dam, which this is not going to be, it would be every year. And the state does inspect some of those. And the other really important factor when you're thinking about dam removal for a dam like this that does not have flood storage is that it has to pass, if this becomes a significant hazard dam, it has to pass the 1,000-year flood. So it's a very large and conservative safety standard. And it has to have a foot of space available on top of the dam. And so what we're seeing is many people who are trying to repair their dams, the top of the spillway is having to go way low, and then you lose the storage should you want to do something with the water on the dam. And there's not a lot of storage on this dam. It just sort of elevates everything above sediment and water. So it's a long story, but it's a really important piece of the safety aspects. The other thing is this dam has some major deficiencies. You have to really know the foundation of the dam, and most dams in Vermont that are like this, we don't know what they're sitting on, how they're attached to the bedrock in this case, what's going on the sides of the dam. So if you really wanted to do a repair, you have to almost disassemble part of the dam, invasively inspect the whole thing, and then build it all back together to try to retain a piece of the dam. That's why Alex was saying like it'd be almost impossible and super costly to retain this dam or to modify it in any way, really, to meet all those standards now.
I know that Alicia has a question, but before we go to that, I want to follow up with what you're saying, and which is that when I seem to recall in an earlier discussion, Roy, that the other hazard for this dam is of another dam. And as a consequence, if the other dam either fails or has to release an emergency release, that might be comparable to a 1,000-year flood, which is the highest standard of stress that the dam would be exposed to. Am I correct there?
Well, there is a higher design standard out there called the half probable maximum flood. But and I believe actually that is the design standard for Molly's Falls because it's a high hazard dam.
Yeah.
It sits above the village and it would impact a lot of structures where people live and work.
Okay.
But the cascading of dam failure on these main stem river dams is an issue because you sort of have to design to make sure if one dam fails, well, are they all going to start failing consequently? And then Montpelier is sitting downstream of, there's actually another dam, very pretty big dam, active hydro dam downstream.
Well, I do know that Green Mountain Power, even for Montpelier, had estimated that the higher, not to speak about the volume of the, I mean, excuse me, the volume or the speed of the water, but that it would be 7 feet high at the Montpelier Agway if the dam was released in Molly's Falls. It would get there a few hours past the failure point, but it would still cause that much water. Quite a bit more here, and definitely a lot more in Marshfield. But it would be still quite significant as far downstream as Montpelier. So, Alicia?
Well, one thing to note about the Mullins Falls Dam is that it is being actively maintained.
It's being. It does have a gate, which is a problematic gate that could be a full release gate.
But nonetheless.
Yeah.
Unlike Batchelder Dam, which has seen zero maintenance in at least 75 years. So.
Good point.
That's true.
Yeah.
And that's because the risk is way lower at Batchelder.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Nevertheless.
Yeah.
Alicia?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for your somewhat sobering presentation. And gee, I feel like I'm shuffling, a bit. We haven't taken good care of our dam. A little guilt there. I'm just trying to contextualize your presentation more broadly. And I don't pretend to understand every nuance, but it seems like what you folks do is dam removal. Have you ever modified, restored, or only partially removed a dam? You know, because I've gone to surgeons who always want to cut, and somebody else perhaps has a different perspective. So I'm just wondering, I'm not saying that's you, but I'm wondering what the scope of your practice in dam remediation has been.
As far as Friends of the Winooski River, we have only fully removed a dam, in part because our mission is ecological restoration, and the funding that we have access to is for ecological restoration.
Mhm.
So those are the opportunities that we're looking for. SLR may have more experience.
I think Roy
Maybe
can
I'll
speak to that.
Yeah, so we do a lot of dam safety work, both on the assessment side. And we have a few active dam projects right now, repair and reconstruction, and repair the dam last year. Working with a landowner, so I think I would say we probably do more dam removals. There are a lot more small dams out there that are obsolete and failing and causing issues in rivers that we spend time taking those out, but we do both dam safety, rehab, and reconstruction as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And we did look at those options, we did evaluate those alternatives.
So I think something that's on the mind of most Plainfielders right now is, what happens if we have another event like we did in 2023 on the Winooski? Is this dam likely to survive that? I mean, we're talking that through, you know, things take time. But we've had a flood 2 years in a row, and I just sort of want you to speak to those concerns, because I think we're all a little bit traumatized.
I think we are all a little bit traumatized, yes. I live in Montpelier, and so, yeah. Yeah, we don't know.
It's a possibility that it would fail if there's another dam, if there's another flood event.
Yes,
There's no way
or
to,
it could fail even if there's not another flood event, I think, the freeze thaw thing, I mean, it might not be like a big failure, but it could crumble.
But you would expect it to last until you finish your paperwork.
we can't predict that. There's no way to predict that.
Well, Clark Sawmill, we were hoping to remove in a planned and intentional way, and the river beat us to that one, so.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, this dam is made of blocks, as you guys noted, and so, and the blocks are huge. So a block could just come out and then destabilize the dam after that, it seemed to me. There's a possibility of that.
I think, yeah, we can't know for sure, but I guess one thing we do know is we've worked at probably close to 100 dams in the last 20 years. And there have been dams where we arrived on the site or with the state and we're like, we need to draw this dam down right now because it's about to fail. Like Dunkley Pond Dam in Rutland a couple years ago. There was this big concern that people were gonna get injured and there was gonna be a flood downstream. So the state came in right as we were about to design its removal. And they lowered the whole thing. This is not that case right now. Like, I don't think, and again, we could have a major flood tomorrow or recently, and then something like knock on wood that doesn't happen, it could fail. So there is a condition rating on dams. One is an unsafe dam, that's the lowest condition. Then there's poor, satisfactory, and good, and I believe this one is poor condition. So there's some major issues. The seepage is the downfall of the dam. In these block dams, like you were just saying, you don't know exactly when that's gonna happen. Like, we could have an ice flow on the river and a big hunk of ice knocks out one or two key pieces and the thing will start to unravel.
Yeah.
That if that started to happen, the state would probably arrive here based on all of us calling like this dam's falling apart now. And we would sort of buttress it and then really expedite how to get that dam out of there immediately. This is an opportunity to kind of get ahead of it, get funding and do it in a controlled way, so. Again, I guess I don't know if it doesn't exactly answer the question, but it sort of gets around like.
I mean, what do, you know, we're all sitting here with our fingers crossed, but, and we should be.
Mhm.
But how tight do we have to cross?
Moderately tight.
Thank you, that- I got the answer.
I'd like to,
It has been there for a long time.
Yeah,
I will say that the East Calais Dam that I showed the picture of, after it had that partial breach in 2023, there was a big community meeting. And every other person at that meeting said, but it never broke before. It,
Yeah.
you don't know.
I mean,
until it happens.
just one other little context then. So we've been doing this like 20+ years in Vermont. There, even in 2011, Tropical Marine, like there were no dam failures in the state. We were close at a couple spots. And now we're here, and in the past 2 years, there've been dam failures all around the state. So
I
we're
think we've
getting,
had 6 just in the Winooski watershed.
right, so. This is a question many towns are asking, like you could go to Londonderry. There's a dam that looks identical to Batchelder. It's sitting in the village. Many people are asking these questions now because we're hearing word now. And it's actually a good thing that dam safety is really, we're coming up to the standards. We've been way behind our neighbors in New Hampshire. In most of the region, because we just haven't had the resources. And honestly, dams hadn't been a huge issue in Vermont. Other states have had big failures. But now we've seen like flood damage and failures. So before I would have kept my fingers crossed a little looser because I'm like, yeah, they were fine in Irene. We haven't seen these big failures, but I'm like, we've seen so many failures in the last few years. It's a little unnerving when there's hazards in the middle of our towns.
I could add something also that in 2015, the former emergency management director for Plainfield and I took a federal dam safety training. And the presenters for that dam safety training were all primarily based in the state of North Carolina. And the prior year, they experienced a whole series of high rainfall events, very similar to what we've experienced in the last 2 years. And they had inside the state 110 dam failures in that 2-year period of time. So it's a really based on how climate patterns create local weather events that are beyond the normal scale of weather events. And they became instant experts in dam safety as a consequence of having this series of catastrophic failures. And the other point I wanted to say was in the earliest atlas, Beers Atlas images of Plainfield, you see how the housing lots were allocated and there was no dam. So it shows actually an arrow in one of the Beers Atlas, a good place to put a dam. It's actually indicated on the Beers Atlas that a dam should go where it was ultimately put. But the other thing you see is that people, after the dam was put in, people started building houses next to the impoundment because they didn't do that when it was a gorge. But when it stopped being a gorge, they said, well, let's build next to that. It's a nice, calm, lake-like surface where we can put our house. And that's increased the risk actually for future homeowners. I mean, for homeowners up to the present, because the impoundment does raise the water level behind it. And therefore, the dam in a way attracted people to a more dangerous position.
Question.
Go to the microphone.
Question for the river ecologists in the room. Are there any pros just on the environmental side of things, just on the health of the stream and everything? Pros to keeping the dam? No. Oh, got it. Just making sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe
Oh,
just-
well, there's one teeny detail. No, it's not so teeny. There are mussels, little, bivalves, yes, who live in the sediment downstream of the dam where it's, upstream, oh gosh.
Probably upstream.
Probably upstream, yeah. And we will need to rescue them out of there and put them someplace safe while the dam is being removed and return them back. And hope that works out for them.
I'm kind of glad you brought this up, because like the fish passage numbers on this dam are exceptional, like it's way at the high end. But what was it again?
110 kilometers.
Like, that's a huge change to a watershed.
You're saying once the dam is gone.
Once the dam's out, which can now move over this massive distance compared to being blocked here. The other thing that's really shocking, when we were river walking and our waders were sinking into sand. It looks like a desert, the river, and up to our knees. And you get outside the impoundment and you see cobble and sand and boulder. And it becomes really diverse, and we saw this in East Burke when they removed an old sawmill dam that was failing. The change in habitat is astonishing, and the fish, so reconnecting the fish and then like giving them this amazing place to live will really change the setting. And then,
And what,
Yeah.
a couple things that are important in terms of the fish are that brook trout, our Vermont state fish, our native trout. They have a really small temperature range where they thrive, like 55 to 60 degrees. And when the rivers don't have any shade and our summers are hotter, we're seeing brook trout populations falling around the state. And if we can open up more habitat, particularly headwaters habitat, then they have more cold water habitat that they can spread out into. And also it improves the genetic diversity because that dam has been keeping apart different populations of fish for 150 years. So.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that. So I'm wondering, so there are populations of brook trout in the river on either side of the dam?
Yeah.
Okay, because my question was, if there's great fish habitat, once the dam is removed, would there be fish who could take advantage of it? Would there be any stocking needed? No. Okay, so the fish populations that currently exist would mingle genetically and they would just increase in number and because they would have better
They would
and
be
more
so
habitat. Fish. Yeah.
Well, you were starting to say something.
I was thinking of there's some more ecological benefits. I mean, one of the big ones is like, do you remember what was the yardage of sediment behind the dam?
We estimate 35 to 60,000 cubic yards.
So it's 15 yards in a dump truck and 30,000 even.
So 60,000 is like 4,000 dump trucks.
It's a lot of sediment that builds up and it's filling the river, as you saw in that profile plot. Like, should this dam fail, there's a safety hazard, but then we have 60,000 yards of sediment drilling down the river for the next 10 years.
Right.
And on that sediment is some phosphorus, so like there'll be water quality benefits also for the project that are really substantial. To me, like, the fact that there's such a benefit from a risk reduction, fish passage and water quality, it's kind of a home run project. I think that's why we're hearing people are reviewing this favorably, because it's very expensive, but you also have like all these people who want these kind of projects to happen.
I haven't heard anyone speak to what will happen to that sediment in a planned dam removal. What is done with those 60,000 cubic yards? What happens to them in a planned removal?
Sure. So, during construction, as the sediment is removed, it's typically hauled off site and disposed of in a pit
Where
or
does it go?
We have
Anywhere.
to find a place.
yeah. And then.
But you
if-
get it out of the watershed, so it doesn't, the phosphates, for instance, don't end up in Lake
Well,
Champlain.
not out of the watershed, but in a place that's what's called hydrologically disconnected. So
Okay.
like. an
Dry
old
upland
quarry.
areas,
Yeah.
yeah.
The one issue for that is we haven't tested the sediment. There's often things in the sediment, so. If in an ideal world, it's clean, like we put it on farm fields and
Right.
people have grown food because it's very nutrient rich. In the worst case, it's got something nasty on it. We have to get it out of the river and like put it in a disposal site. Often there's a gradient, there's a little, oftentimes we see, they're called PAHs. It's just a byproduct of burning. They're in a lot of our communities, so then we have to find a designated spot, but contractors have lots of spaces and our creativity to find places to put this material.
I've noticed that the state has been dumping river silt between the northbound and southbound lanes of 89 near the Berry exit. So that because it forms a trough between the two,
Yeah.
there's no water connection. And I see they're gradually filling that area up. It's a huge area that
Oh.
basically they're filling with both woody debris and silt.
I think I've seen that filling, yeah. I thought, did you have your hand up, I have a question?
My question was the same, thank you.
We hope to remove 2 dams this summer from the Stevens Branch in Berry, and those have relatively little sediment behind them. But we do have a disposal site for those in Berry town. It's part of the project, finding the disposal site, getting the disposal site permitted. It also needs permits. Really fun.
I have a species question, which had partly been answered by the fact that there are brook trout naturally in the river. But there also are, I believe, salmon that are stocked in the river. Do they stock to take into account the dams that are existing in the river? In other words, there's a dam at Bolton, there's a dam at Middlesex, there's a dam in Montpelier, or 2 dams.
The salmon are only brought as far as Richmond, I think. They don't bring them past the Bolton Dam.
If this dam were removed, would it make it attractive to add salmon?
No, because there are still the Bolton Dam, the Essex Dam, the Montpelier, there's an active hydro dam in Montpelier.
The 2, yeah.
Yeah.
2 dams. Any other questions? Well, I think that's pretty much covered it. It's a lot of stuff. Thank you very much, both of you, and thank you for Roy for being here too. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna close the meeting again.
Alrighty, yeah, I formally adjourn.